We are joined here today by Sandra Reich. She is the director of the Montreal Center for Anxiety and Depression. Thank you for being with us today.
That's a pleasure.
And you know, today we've got a very interesting topic. We're going to be talking all about how you can work with your partner if he or she may be coping with depression. And I think that to start off with, some people might not even know how to identify depression. So how can we know if our partner really is dealing with this?
Well, globally, depression is indicated by a number of factors such as fatigue, irritability, loss of interest in activities that usually have been pleasurable in your life,
right.
Loss of appetite or eating too much, insomnia, sleeping too much, sleeping too little, a general feeling of, malaise, sometimes persistent pains in the body, headaches, sometimes even digestive problems.
So physical pain as well.
Absolutely. And in worst case scenarios, even thoughts of suicide.
Wow.
And that's a general idea of depression. But then I think, it's interesting to see the differences between men and women because they do manifest quite differently.
Exactly. So how would it manifest itself in men?
Well, I think, what would be interesting to look at is how it manifests differently between women and men. Yeah. So, for example, if you take a woman, she's going to get depressed, she's going to blame herself. And men, for example, are going to blame others.
Right.
Women are going to avoid conflict. Men will probably create conflict.
Okay.
Women, for example, are going to go into sadness and a feeling of worthlessness. Men actually might become more aggressive and more blaming, more suspicious, more guarded. Right. So that can be quite confusing because it doesn't look like what we classically consider depression. The other thing that shows up is that women tend to self-soothe with things like friendship, love, and food in particular, whereas men go towards things like alcohol, sports, TV, and sometimes sex.
So very stark differences.
Stark.
How would you suggest one helps support their partner if they are depressed?
Well, again, it's tricky with male depression in particular because you want to be supportive, so you definitely want to encourage them towards treatment and you want to be there for them, but you don't want to indulge because the problem is because men and depression is something that's so difficult for men to acknowledge because there's a sense that that's weakness, which of course is not true.
Right.
So men would rather talk about anything else but being depressed. Therefore, if you in any way go into a very typical female pattern of wanting to caretake and rescue, as we do, we want to make things better for our partner. Absolutely. It's very female. It actually colludes, and it actually might make your partner be a little bit more in denial about their depression and a little bit more resistant to get treatment. So you have to be careful about that because, in fact, depression doesn't just affect him. It's going to affect you, your marriage, and even your kids.
I was going to ask about that, how it sort of bleeds into the rest of the family.
It bleeds in enormously, which is why you do nobody any favor by not calling it out because good health is something you have a right to demand in your family. So you want to definitely bring the issue out and really say that, this is going to affect all of us, so we need to deal with this. Again, men are not always going to realize that's a depression. They're going to say, oh, I'm just tired. They're going to tend towards physical symptoms.
So the most important thing is to bring it up and talk about it, but not necessarily to enable.
Absolutely. Well said. Exactly right. Exactly. And we do tend to enable because we innately are caretakers as women. So we have to be very careful about that. So another thing that happens is women, when we get depressed, our boundaries are weak, whereas men, when they get depressed, become even more controlling.
Right.
So that sets up an interesting dance between men and women. So it can be very confusing for the woman in that situation.
Sandra Reich, Director of the Center for Anxiety and Depression, thank you for being with us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.